Yep.
And one of the things the shred method does is, because you're very intentionally using your income, the water line actually goes down quite a bit, and you notice all those extra expenses that you're like, why am I spending on that?
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins.
Today's guest is a two-time TEDx speaker with over 6 million views, a 4-time Amazon best-selling author, and the founder of the Shred Method. Please welcome Adam Carroll. All right, Mr. Adam Carroll, so excited to start this conversation because it's a battle I think that I play in my head all the time. This, the money, the mortgage, the when, the how many payments, when to do it, and it always feels like there's so much a number game that I don't know. So I'm so excited to get into this, and you've put so much time into this. I'm fascinated by your record and experience in some of these talks, like the TEDx talks with over 6 million views. That's massive. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Brett. I appreciate it very much. I'm excited too, where this conversation goes. I've listened to a bunch of your shows already. And I think what I have to share with your audience might come in very handy for some of them that value their own freedom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just getting started, just letting everybody know, by this point, hopefully our listeners know, I'm not a physician and you are not a physician, right? So how do we end up here, the two of us talking to physicians? This is very cool. I'm a real estate guy and you're a money guy. So let's talk a little bit about your background and kind of where you got started and where you're at now.
Yeah. I think if we go in the Wayback Machine here, when I graduated from college, I was a debt statistic. And I had borrowed a ton of money. I had lived like a rich college kid and then quickly ended up a broke professional. And I realized that, if I was going to get ahead in life, I really had to get my financial situation under control. My wife happened to be a nurse and was working a night shift. So she would leave at 7 p.m. and work till 7 a.m. 3 days a week. And those, 12 hours, or certainly at least the first 3 or 4, maybe even 5 hours of her shift, when she was gone, I started reading. And I was just reading books on personal finance that at some point I went, well, I should be doing all these things. Why am I not doing this? And, fast forward a little bit, Brett, I got into the mortgage business. I learned a lot about financing, about leverage, started investing in real estate, and then really started to dial into what we do today, which is all around the Shred Method, how to play the bank's game against itself and win.
And it's so interesting. One of the things that popped out to me there, Adam, was living like a rich college student. What do you mean by that?
Well, when I was in school, and I maintain this is the case today, that most college students live in this 4-year bubble where and it could be 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years, depending on what you choose to go after. But I was in a 4-year bubble. I was insulated from any consequences for the most part around money. So I was borrowing money in the nature of student loans. I was paying for things with my credit cards. And what I was finding was that I would be okay with whatever the minimum payment was on my credit cards. I'd make that, no problem. But I was paying very little attention to how much the balance was growing to over time. And so I was a fairly popular guy on my college campus because if we went out, it was my card that got pulled out first. And I was surrounded by a lot of people who are like, I'll get you next time. I'll get you next time. Only there was no next time. It was just me every time pulling it out. And so, I learned my lesson the hard way. I had a great college experience. I would say it was the longest and most expensive party I've ever been to. And then I realized afterwards that I needed to learn the fundamentals of money. And then what I tell people today is I'm really in pursuit of the mastery of money. And I think there's a big distinction that some people believe they're really good at investing in the market or buying real estate. And that's good. That's one avenue. That's one path you can go down. But the mastery of money really takes into account every facet of money. And when you're a student of all of that, you realize how little you know over time. And my goal has just been to continually increase my knowledge base, month over month, year over year, and then put it into practice. And to date, it's been a pretty good run. And now I'm just excited to share that with other people.
And this idea of the rich college student and kind of not having this connection to the repercussions.
Yeah.
And that's kind of also known as no skin in the game, because it's not like when we were college students, we had to, oh, you want an $8,000 loan? Okay, here you go. Go to the student aid office, financial aid office, sign these documents, you're good. But out here in the real world, unless there's collateral to put that against, or skin equity, piece of actual capital coming to the table, it's not like that in the real world. So there's a disconnect there.
Totally.
And it leaves you, almost presents that scenario of separation. And we don't have the ability for that delayed, a lot of us won't have that ability for the delayed gratitude piece, right? Delayed gratification, sorry. And it's kind of like just whirlwind of madness. And here we are in this bubble, you call it. That's very interesting. But then on the other side, there are also some people who may have not been like us and in that piece where they know they're acquiring this debt and there's really no way around it. And especially in the world of medicine, where the college piece is called a career education career, because it's substantial. And there's no way that you can go through that. I mean, looking at the numbers, you're probably 200, 300,000 on average for these student debts. So no matter which person you are, whether you're in this bubble with the quick card or on the other side in the books, just pounding it and stacking up these debts, what is the best way to pay these off the most efficient? I say fastest and efficient, and are they the same?
Yeah. Well, to answer that question, Brett, you actually have to kind of dig into the math of how these loans work. And, people will say, well, they're simple interest loans. It's no big deal. You're charged whatever the interest rate is on them. The challenge is that most, and I'm going to throw physicians, doctors, surgeons, specialists, but the rest of us lumped into this category. We don't really fully grasp when a loan is amortized over a certain amount of time, say 30 years. Right. And most student loans today are amortized somewhere in the 20, 25 or 30-year range, just to make sure college is affordable. This was done some time ago. I believe it was in the early Obama administration. They decided they were going to make college affordable. Well, that translated meant we're going to kick the amortization table out as far as we can so that students can afford the payment that they have once they're done with school. But what we never really called into question was, so how much more in interest are we going to pay over the length of that loan? And some people will say, well, it's fine. Whether you're buying a home or investing in a rental property or getting your college degree, the debt allows you to get that. And I don't disagree. Leverage is great for that very reason. However, what I want to make sure people are aware of is that the two greatest expenses we have in life today are taxes and the interest expense on debt. And that first one, we don't have a lot of control over. If you own your own business, you own real estate, you figure out how to make, personal expenses, business expenses and the like, you can begin to carve out some of the tax liabilities that you have. Take paper losses and those kinds of things. That'll help you get there. But the interest expense on debt is where most professionals in particular, where they kind of turn a blind eye. And I've heard professionals say, I'm going to pay the very minimum on my student loans. And hopefully within 20 years, it'll all be forgiven anyway. And when you do that, you don't realize maybe that you're going to pay at least double what you borrowed for your student loans in interest. And there is a way to knock them down super quick that would allow you to get to your financial freedom point that much faster. And so I think deep down, that's ultimately your question is, what is the fastest way? The fastest way is to go at your debt. The way I like to describe it is like a hot knife through a butter, a stick of butter. You got to go after it. And this is not always popular advice because some people, they want to lifestyle up. And I maintain that if you want to build a bigger life, you have to keep your lifestyle tamped down a bit and really knock down some of those larger debts that you've acquired over time.
So tamp down the lifestyle. Another way of looking at that is I've heard it called lifestyle creep.
Yes.
As we creep into like our careers and stuff. But that's just getting back to that delayed gratification.
It is.
And it's back to that test. I don't know who did it, where they put children around a table and they put candy on the table.
Yep.
And the fascinating correlation between the kids who wait and the kids who look and take, or the kids who take, like that the ability to delay gratification is a major part of this. And I heard, like when we started, Adam, you were talking about, it's almost like everything else, it starts with the mindset.
It is.
And whether you're, and I've fallen victim to this myself, turning a blind eye to the interest on the debt, and just because it's there. But I've also shifted, and I now have a mindset to where I'm focusing on that, and I can focus not only my cash flow, but my attention on the things that I'm doing to attack this stuff.
Yeah.
So is there any way to, besides the, tamp down the lifestyle, obviously, not increasing the car I drive, the house I live in, the trips I go on, all of the stuff, and keeping that down. But is there an easy way to look at, like, was it lowest interest? Is it the highest payment, lowest principal? Like, are there any like key takeaways that we could talk about, or are we just pointing right at the shred method?
Yeah, no, I think let's unpack all of those things a little bit, Brett, because I think you're touching on almost all of it that makes a difference here. Number one, it is mindset. And I think in a wealthy mindset, someone that's living in a wealthy mindset knows that their income is the greatest tool they have to create wealth, but only if there is money left over at the end of the month. So you can make a ton, but if you spend it all and then some, you're never going to be wealthy. And so the mindset for us right off the bat was, how do we live on 70 or 60 or 50% of what we make and get really comfortable with that lifestyle, knowing that within just a few short years, our passive income would supersede the cost of that lifestyle, right? And that's a mindset shift. That's just saying, I'm willing to do for a few years what most people won't, so I can do for the rest of my life what most people can't. And most people couldn't write $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 checks. They just can't do it. And yet, if you want to create massive wealth, or what we like to call massive passive permanent streams of income, you got to be at a different category. You're not putting $500 or $1,000 or even $5,000 a month into dollar cost average type investments. You're writing big checks into syndications or partnerships or funding deals, early stage deals kind of thing. So mindset is first. Secondarily, and I mentioned it, that your income is the greatest tool you have to create wealth, but your income should really do four things, Brett. It should cover your expenses. It should eliminate debt. It should grow your wealth, and you should be able to have fun with it. Like go out and, enjoy yourself. And what most people do is they get two of those things knocked out. They cover their expenses and they have fun, and they never really destroy debt, and they never really build wealth. And so what we like to describe as the efficiency of your income could best be described this way. If you were going to the grocery store on a Friday morning, okay, so you get up, you get in your car, you drive to the grocery store, come back home, knowing you're going to go to the post office later that afternoon, would you leave your car idling in the driveway all day?
No.
Why not?
Doesn't seem reasonable.
Yeah, not reasonable. It's inefficient, hard on the vehicle, hard on the environment, burns gas unnecessarily. And yet what most people do is they get paid, like let's say on a Friday, the money sits in their checking account and it sits there until they swipe their ATM card or do ACH transactions, maybe have some auto withdrawals. But at most most any time of the month, there is money sitting in that account that is idling. It's just sitting there. All the while, we're sending in money on amortized debts like student loans and mortgages. And there is a much more efficient way to allow your income to flow through that system, which creates more of a flywheel effect. So the money never really sits in your account idling. It's always working for you, either blasting away debt or going into building your wealth. And this is what most of us have never been taught. And it's central to the shred method.
That's very interesting. And I love that analogy of the idling car and the way that that's tied to the cash in your account, because the cash in your account, and then you're going to wait, just popped into my mind when you said this, I'm going to put that cash in my account, and then I'm going to wait until my due date on the mortgage while that interest is accruing.
That's right.
While I'm waiting, right?
That's
so the car
exactly
is sitting
right.
out there idling while I could just use it, right? We could
Totally.
set it, we could have an autonomous car, right? Is that
Yeah.
the right word? Autonomous car where it
yeah.
can drive itself. Man, I'm so excited because integrations, automations, auto pay, as long as you don't let those things run away on you, because when you set auto pay stuff and then all of a sudden you're paying on stuff that you're not checking on, and that gets crazy. But used wisely with the right focus, the right attention, it's not allowing the car to idle anymore.
That's exactly right. And to your point earlier, this idea of people who are making a lot of money, and they get you were saying delayed gratification, or they lifestyle up, they have lifestyle creep. I like to call that doctoritis, because the doctors have prolonged their college career by an extra 5 years or 6 years. Then they go through residency, and by the time they're actually making real money, it's like, I just want to have all the stuff that everybody else has, because I've waited now 6 years or 8 years to get it. And so they go out and they buy a nicer car and a bigger home, and they can afford it, quote unquote. But what happens when you make more money is the watermark goes up quite a ways, and all the things down below the waterline, which are, hazards and rocks and sandbars that you don't see, you can avoid them because the watermark is high enough. Mm-hmm. So if you're making a lot of money, you don't really notice some of the auto pays you set up 12 months ago that you never use again. You don't really notice that, I'm probably spending too much going out to eat, but I can afford it, so it's not a big deal. Yep. And one of the things the shred method does is, because you're very intentionally using your income, the water line actually goes down quite a bit, and you notice all those extra expenses that you're like, why am I spending on that? Because what you're seeing in addition is you're seeing your debts go down in massive fashion, because you're writing these big lump sum payments to your lenders. And there's something about it that gets very addicting. Like, you begin to think, when's my next check coming so I can write a big fat check to knock my mortgage down? And then if you're tracking, the benefit here is that what we call a shred account, which could be a line of credit, it could be, a B-lock, a P-lock, a HELOC, that also gives you liquidity. So as you're building equity in your property, you still have access to it. It's still what we would call accessible money, not available money, but that accessible money still allows you to feel like you're very abundant.
And I was just going to question that too, of who holds the money has the power. And that's kind of the way of, getting over a cold here. So that's kind of the way of maintaining the power when you're holding that, HELOC, you said, but you mentioned some other things, PLOC, and what were those other ones you mentioned?
Yeah, PLOC would be a personal line of credit. So maybe someone who doesn't have a home. So let's say you've got a new physician, they're just getting started in their career, they're still an apartment dweller, they'd like to knock out their student loans. One of the ways you could do that is by going and getting a PLOC, a personal line of credit, and that would function as your shred account. And all of your income would flow through that PLOC. The system would tell you when to make the lump sum payments to the student loans, and you'd see them start to just get knocked out, one by one. A B-lock is a business line of credit. This might be for someone who has an LLC or a PLLC they're operating under. And the BLOCs are a little bit easier to get if you've been in business for a while, 12 to 24 months. But if someone owns a home and they put, any amount down on that home and it's appreciated somewhat, you could go get a $10 or $15 or $20,000 home equity line of credit, a HELOC, and do the exact same strategy using the HELOC. So lots of lines of credit, they're all kind of wired the same way. It's just one is tied to your business account. One might be tied to your personal, call it a kind of a signature line of credit. And the other one would be tied to the equity in your home.
So I feel like we're going into this, the shred method here a little bit, because I heard you say simple interest before, and now we're talking about using these HELOCs, PLOCs, BLOCs as kind of like a sourcing, a shred account. So to me, I feel like now we're going to talk about the difference in the way the interest is charged in these PLOC, BLOC, and HELOCs, right?
Yeah, great call. So the deal with an amortized mortgage or student loan is over the course of 30 years, the metaphor we like to use is if you imagine a stoplight, a traffic light turned on its side over the amortization table of your debt, the first 10 years are red light. Right. So you're paying a majority of interest, very, very little principal. And that is the nature of an amortized debt. You pay nearly all of the interest up front. And then as the balance starts dwindling, you pay more and more of the principal because the payment obviously remains the same. So the second 10 years of any of these debts, yellow light, and the last 10 years would be green light, meaning the majority of your payment is going to principal and less to interest. And so when we're using the line of credit on these, Brett, you're going to borrow a lump sum payment out of the line of credit as an example, and you'll be charged simple interest on that amount of money. But generally speaking, most lenders will charge interest on the average daily balance of that line. So because if you're following the methodology, because your income is dropping in every couple of weeks, the amount of interest that you pay on that money that you've borrowed is negligible, because the average daily balance, though it's going up and down throughout the month, the average daily balance is relatively low. And the software is built on a fairly complex algorithm that makes it so that's constantly measuring, how much do you have coming in, how much do you have going out, and how do we keep that average daily balance at a manageable number. So in effect, we're using short-term simple interest to offset long-term amortized interest. And the end result is you accelerate the amortization table. So you are speeding up the process of paying that loan off. And as a result, it ends up being almost all green light, right? There's very little red light in the process.
In this long-term amortized, man, I can't even amortized, right? That's the word. Yep. I can't say it, but I love using it because that's how I create cash flow when we leverage long-term debt like that.
Totally.
That is the compounding interest too. And that's like, there's simple versus compounding there, right? That's that difference maker. We're using simple and we're paying that simple down with our income, but that those chunks or those big bubbles are used to progress from the red light to yellow light to green light.
Correct. As quickly as possible. Because if you imagine, take a brand new mortgage. If a physician goes out and buys just for round numbers, $1 million home, and let's say their payment is $6,500 a month. Well, of that $6,500, about $500 of it's going to principal every month, and $6,000 is going to interest. And it will steadily shift, but not by much. Like month 2, $508 will go to principal, and the rest will go to interest. And then the next month, it might be $516 goes to principal. So, yes, you're starting to pay that down, but $500 in $1 million note does not look like you're paying much off very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so with the shred method, what they may see is once a month, twice a month, every other month, they're going to see big lump sums that are cut out of the line line of credit and posted to that mortgage. And what you'll do is if you put 10 grand towards $1 million mortgage, well, what you've probably done is you've accelerated the amortization table by somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 20 months. So, you've skipped, I mean, let's just assume if it's $5,000 a month in interest and you skip 20 months of payments, that's $100,000 in interest that you skipped.
Wow.
Making one lump sum payment.
Wow.
Right. So this is the power of this. And to boot, you're increasing the equity in the property. So this is money that you'd normally just send to your banker anyway. And it's a bit of a sales line, but I tell anyone who's looking at the shred method, did you make a mortgage payment last month? Well, yeah, of course I did. And I would say, does it feel good to you to drop $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 unnecessarily in your banker's pocket? And they're kind of taken aback by it. And I'm like, if you truly use this system, you're shaving hundreds of thousands of dollars away from paying interest to someone else and keeping it as wealth building opportunity for yourself.
Very, very interesting. And then the shred could be applied towards the college debt or the house mortgage. I mean, that same scenario, because they're both the same type. Whether or not it's college made affordable. And for the listeners, I've got my air quotations going up with stretching that amortization out so far. Man, I just flowed that word right in there and it even slipped that time.
You nailed it.
But stretching it out for 30, 40 years, whatever it may be to make it affordable, it's all compounding still. Yeah. So the shred method could be applied towards paying off your student debt. It could be applied towards paying off your mortgage, right? So any type of debt like that, the shred method is going to crush it.
That's exactly right. And again, going back to the mindset comment earlier, Brett, this would be like, choosing to run a marathon and having a 30-pound weight vest on. Now, I know there's nut jobs out there that'll go do that and like pride themselves on running a marathon with weighted vests on. But that's kind of akin to someone carrying a big, long student loan debt for 30 years. When if you realized, you could actually get rid of that 5 pounds at a time, 2 pounds at a time, and get down to your existing weight, but do it in no time flat, most everyone would do that to be able to go run that marathon efficiently. And the same is true of our money. We have these debts, and what we have, I think, done is we've kind of succumbed to societal pressure and what the bank tells us to do. That if we're listening to the bank and to society, we need to have 12 months worth of living expenses in the bank at all times, right? Well, who does that benefit? The bank for the most part.
Out, yeah.
We are supposed to dollar cost average invest into the stock market for the majority of our life. And what we're hoping for in doing that is that we get to this compound interest inflection where you have enough money in there that it starts doubling on its own. And most people don't get to the compound interest inflection point till their 50s or 60s. It's like the story of Warren Buffett was worth $5 billion at age 65. And all of his wealth has been made after that, $5 billion. Now he's worth 120 or something. But the majority of that was made after the doublings of his money. He hit that compound interest inflection point and went skyward. I believe using the shred method, you can just blast away, eviscerate your debt, and then scale up your wealth building opportunity in no time to where you can hit compound inflection points, well within the 10-year mark. And then from that point forward, if you're living on a physician's income and your debt level is very, very low, you're putting away hundreds of thousands of dollars a year towards wealth building and passive income building opportunities.
So there's back to that mindset piece of being able to, get in, get after it, and attack the debt. So no matter what the debt is for, how much the debt is, that's the mindset. There's another psychological piece though to this too, Adam, of like that. It's like that 30-pound vest when you're running a marathon. That thought, that thing hanging over your shoulder is this debt. And it's the thing of, okay, what would it feel like if that weight was lifted? right? Yeah. Imagine running that marathon and then taking that vest off. Like when you can for everybody out there listening who's written that last check, right? Yeah. That last one to pay off the vehicle, to pay off the house, to do whatever. What does that feel like?
Feels
there's
good.
That psychological piece that's like lifting and get rid of it. So it's not only when we start, like where we start from,
yep,
but it's also something that's behind us and chasing us and pressing us down.
Yep. Yeah, no question. And candidly, I did a podcast not too long ago with a physician, and it's called The Worthy Physician. And the woman started it because one of her best friends from residency committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And she said the financial pressure, the job pressure, she was taking home just the anxiety and the worry of what she had done that day, and it stayed with her every day. And then to boot, being $300K deep in student loans, she said it was just too much. Yeah. And so she was doing a show all about how to just, it was more mental health than anything else. But I said, imagine how freeing it would feel to be done with the student loans early on in your career, have a house that's paid for, and you don't become one of those people that just resents the job you're in because I have to do it now. I've lifestyled up to this level and there's nothing that could pay me this amount of money.
Yep.
I would much rather see a medical professional work really hard for 10 or 20 years of their life, but at the 15 or 20 year mark, know that they had as much or more passive income coming in as they were making going to a hospital or a clinic. Cause then you're truly free. If you want to be done, be done. Go serve humanity in the way you want. But do it because you love it, not because, you got bills to pay.
Yeah. So there's that difference of creating a machine that kills you. And that even happens in high performance. So it doesn't have to necessarily be in the world of medicine or as a physician. The stresses of it, the in and out days, the problems that you have to deal with, the numbers behind it. But even in high performance where maybe I'm in a partnership or I'm a go-getter, but I've created these machines or these systems, these processes that require me to maintain that level of involvement, maintain that level of performance, efficiency, and it's just crushing.
Yeah.
The one thing though that we have to watch out for is the other side of the coin. When okay, I'm focused. I'm keeping my lifestyle down. I'm in the world of medicine. I've heard it many times. Live like a resident after residency.
Yep.
So I've got that going on. I'm saving my money. I'm focused. I'm working, but I want to make sure that everybody's still living, right? Yeah. Because we can set these goals. Goals are nothing if we don't enjoy the journey. Totally. So we've got to find ways that allow us to enjoy. But I can hear my wife telling me right now, not everything we do has to cost money. Be creative.
Right.
Totally. I don't have to drive a Rolls Royce to be happy. Right. I can be happy doing other things, although sitting inside a Rolls. The first time I sat down in a Bentley, there was something that happened to my backside. I'll keep it clean here on the podcast. It was just comforting. It was soothing, it was fitting. It was just like, welcome,
Yes.
But I don't have to have that, right? I can get the same thing in a $1,000 Lazy Boy chair or something,
Totally.
But I just want to make sure that we do watch that point. Is like, okay, we can hold back, be conservative, take things down, but also find ways to enjoy. Because if you don't enjoy and you are working, you could work yourself backwards into a different spot, not working because you have to, like that animal, that weight on your shoulders, but now in this monotony, just over again, and not doing anything good and eating ramen noodles for 20 years,
Yeah. Yeah. And I speaking to that, I'm a guy who likes a nice steak and a good bottle of wine. I want to take vacations that when we take them, they're lavish. I don't want to go on the cheap. I want to stay in nice Airbnbs and I want to fly business class and, that kind of thing. And I think to touch on that lifestyle, those lifestyle choices and the shred method, it allows you to do that without feeling like, oh gosh, we're splurging or we shouldn't be doing this. Because if you've been using the method for 18 or 24 months, Brett, you'll realize that you've actually already saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest that you would have normally paid to Sallie Mae or the Department of Ed or, Wells Fargo or whomever your mortgage is with. You've saved that. You've kind of clawed it back, right? And so as you do that, you realize I can go drop 20 grand on a vacation. I've saved all this money in interest. This was money I normally would have paid this year anyway in interest to my lender. So I'm going to go have that experience and really enjoy it. And my wife and I, we have kind of gotten used to taking an epic trip about every 24 months. And then every 12 months, we'll take one that's maybe not quite so epic, half or 75% of it. But we love that. We love to be able to be happy with what we have, but strive to go experience the things that make life worth living, as opposed to just, we got to get the grind and save as much as possible. Nah.
Content, but not complacent. There's that juggle, content, but not complacent.
That's exactly it.
And there's also something I want to talk with you too, Adam, about good debt versus bad debt.
Yep.
So, even in my mind, as we're talking about this, even if we're leveraging, and in my world, in my perspective, good debt would be debt that's creating cash flow, right? Creating income without requiring me or my time.
Correct.
And then bad debt would be basically a house, right? A house, a mortgage, a car, that kind of debt. Yep. So if I'm leveraging good debt, do I still want to focus and attack it with the shred method?
Yeah, this is a great question. What we have found in our client base is that someone who's investing in lots of properties, so somebody who is maybe a multifamily investor, or they've got lots of single family units, lots of doors, whether those are duplexes, fourplexes, eightplexes, somebody who's got a lot, and I would say a lot being maybe more than 10, they don't see the value in shred because they truly are just investing straight for cash flow. And if they can come up with the down payment on the next place and it creates the cash flow they need, what's the point in ever, diminishing that debt? And I don't fault them for that. I think that's a fine way to live. But if you are living on all of the money that you are making in, passively, then there's no real reason to use shred. But if you're living on 80% or 70% or 60% of what you're making passively, there's no real reason not to use shred, because all you're doing is creating another level of efficiency. And as you create that efficiency as an investor, you're juicing the cap rate on every single property you own, because more and more of your tenant's payment is going to principal every single month. So, we love to have tenants pay our properties off. That's the intent. But what if they're paying it off in 3 to 5 years instead of 15 or 20 or 30? That's really why you would maybe consider doing it. So it's one of those either or. Some people do. They choose to use it as a multifamily or multi-door investor. And some people go, no, I'm good. I want my good debt to roll. I'm taking great tax deductions. And I think it's really more a matter of, personal preference than anything else.
So in that scenario, if I had 10 properties, I had one property paid off, I could leverage a HELOC, and then the rents from the other 9 properties would flow through into that HELOC, and that HELOC would pay down chunks. I would attack one of those mortgages at a time, pay it off, do the same thing, stack them up.
Yep. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Shred it.
That's awesome.
And then at some point, maybe you have a HELOC on every one of them, and that may give you $1 million in, available credit and lines of credit on 10 properties. Mm-hmm. That's where you start looking at going, okay, well, where would I park some of that money to begin to really expand my wealth? And that might be in other properties. It might be in syndications. It might, be investing in businesses. But that's really where, there's an evolution. And this is part of that mastery of money concept I was talking about earlier. I think some people go from, I work in my job and I invest in my 401k. And then they're introduced to real estate. They're like, oh, I love real estate. So I work my job, I invest in my 401k, and I invest in real estate. And some, I think, stop there because they don't realize what else there is other than multifamily, or, you get into car washes or, mini storage or, those kinds of things. But then someone's introduced to, well, if you parked some of the equity you had in a property in an infinite banking policy, overfunded cash value life insurance, and then you took that money and you invested that in a syndication or, a new development of an assisted living facility somewhere that's actually a business you're investing in, that's a different level of investor. And my hope is that your tribe gets to that point. They realize, okay, I did step 1. I'm in step 2. I'm going to step 3. Now what's next? Mm-hmm. Because that's really where some of that true wealth is built. The doors are great. Multifamily is awesome. But when you start getting into some of these others where it's not, it does not require a lot of time or energy. It's massive, passive, permanent streams of income. That's where you realize that financial freedom is truly within your grasp.
At that point, money no longer becomes a thing.
Yeah, totally.
You don't have to pay for anything because everybody wants to pay for you things. They want to be next to you. They want to buy you things.
We call it money irrelevancy. When you get to money being irrelevant, life is good.
Yeah. And kind of getting to that point, you mentioned earlier, mastery of money. And that, like this point, I feel like in our conversation and in theoretically in a person's life, that's where you would be if you're talking about diversifying and compounding these types of investments,
Yeah, totally. I would be remiss if I didn't say that the mastery of money is like climbing a mountain that has no peak. So you're continually on the climb upward, and you realize the higher you get, the more you have to learn. And I think that's part of it too, that for your audience, they have high EP, high earning potential. And now the goal is to tamp down some of their lifestyle desires, that lifestyle creep, and really accelerate their education around what's possible, because their income is the greatest driver they have of building real wealth. Second only to their education, their knowledge base. And so this is why shows like yours are so valuable. You're introducing concepts to people that maybe they knew about it, maybe they didn't know about it before, but they're that much more educated to want to go learn more about it. And I think that every step you take along that path towards mastery just gets you closer and closer to the goal, money irrelevancy.
And that mastery goes, whether it's money, life, self-development, whatever it is, the more you learn, the less you know. It's like that's the never-ending piece. And totally. Simplifying something is taking away all these things and getting down to the one thing. But in this same regard, hearing things like this is planting a seed. And what I love about it is there's so many different perspectives and there's so many different ways. When we talk about mindset, there's consistency in these things. And once that seed is planted and the listeners get to hear the awesome guests like you, Adam, come on and share their experience and share their passion, that seed is nurtured, it's watered, and it starts to grow. So not only do they get to hear them, but the repetition of them is watering that seed of curiosity, and it's coming up and it's growing and it's beautiful. And this path, the shred method, is awesome. And the idea of, I hope this perks so many ears out there, so many millions of ears as we, because this recording will never go away, right? It's going to be on for forever. Perks so many ears because it should be applied. It can be applied. You can make progress or excuses. There's two choices. Yeah. So which one do you choose? And hopefully it's progress, because it can be applied towards student debt. It can be applied towards credit card debt, towards cars, towards houses, towards investments. I mean, there's no reason not to use this. It's possible. So all they have to do is go to the shredmethod.com, right? TheShredmethod.com, the shredmethod.com. And what are they going to find there?
We have a masterclass there, Brett, that is always available. It's always open. There's a ton of articles kind of describing what we do and how we do it. But the masterclass itself is a deep dive into the what, the why, and the how of this working. And when people watch it, generally speaking, we will get one of two responses. One is they'll go, I wish I had done this 10 years ago. Or some will say it's too complicated. And if you are saying that, I just want you to pay close attention to your next mortgage statement and how much is going to interest and how much is going to principal. And we want to flip-flop those two. And we can help you do that in record time by following a very simple software prompt. And the software pretty much does it all for you. So, we like to teach people how it works, but the software really shows them, how to do it on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis.
And so much progress is halted by mindset of something being overwhelming because you don't know what it is.
Right.
But the fascinating piece of that, Adam, is, what's simple? Nothing's going to change unless you make change, right?
Yeah.
Nothing
totally.
is going to change unless you make change. And if there weren't challenges, then there wouldn't be change. So this is a perfect scenario for that. When you see this, when you watch the masterclass, theshred.com, understand that. And when you relate that to your next interest payment or your plan of getting out of debt, lifting that weight off of your shoulders because you are running a marathon and you have this massive student debt on your back, it will never change. You'll continue to kick, and nothing will happen. Yeah. So taking something simple and I guess it's the simple perspective. Don't get overwhelmed by what it is because it's from the outside. Yeah. I mean, from the outside, stuff can look difficult and it may not be, right?
Yeah, totally. I think the hardest part for most people is the first 30 to 60 days because the way we describe it is the banking system has taught us to walk heel toe. And we're trying to teach people to walk toe heel. It just feels backwards. And part of the reason for that is we're used to having a big chunk of money in checking and feel good about it. And I actually feel better when there's less in my checking account and more on my HELOC because that means it's being leveraged in the right way for me. It's backwards. But I can say this, and my wife is probably a better mouthpiece on this topic than I am. But the amount of security and abundance that we have felt using this system, it pales in comparison to, anything we've ever tried before. When we started this, my wife said, I never worry about where the money's coming from. I know it's there. I know it's being used effectively. I know that we own more of our income every month. And as a result of that, she sleeps well at night. That's awesome. For your listeners that, maybe has a worrywart spouse or someone who's really tight on the purse strings and, coupon clipping or whatever their thing is, what this does is it relaxes the need to do that because they probably grew up in a house that had a lot of that. And, this just alleviates a ton of it.
It's so amazing how we're conditioned and what we learned from our family and how that in the first 7 years of our life, how that, sets the path for us. I heard you mention something about 10 years ago. And what I want to know, Adam, is if you could go back 10 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
Well, 10 years ago, we got started. It was actually more like 12 years ago, we got started using the shred method. And we had paid off our house in about 3.5 years. The first time. And the second time we did it, we did a cash out refi when rates were super low and we knew we could shred it again. So we deployed that into syndications and started doing it again and shredded the second time very quickly. If I would go back 10 years, I would say you need to look at syndications. You need to find these particular players and you need to get going. Because it was exactly what I was looking for, which was being invested in real estate and getting the advantage of K1s at the end of the year and cost segregation analysis on the business and being able to deduct a whole bunch of expenses, but having zero input or energy into the management of that. Because I spent the first 10 years prior, I was a real estate guy. I owned a bunch of properties and I did it the wrong way, Brett. I was going out and mowing the lawns myself and showing up and, dealing with toilets and tenants and trash and the whole 9 yards, And my wife would say, every weekend you're not here every weekend you're doing that. You're not here with us, with the kids. And I realized that my 30s, a lot of the weekends were spent, managing real estate. And I love real estate. I don't love managing real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And the syndications really allowed me to do that. So I would have jumped into that a whole lot earlier.
Yeah, you went from the most active of active to the passive of passive. So you went from managing your own rentals, it sounded like, to limited partnerships and syndications.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yep. And I met some really brilliant sponsors along the way that they're top notch at what they do. They have great teams of people around them. And, when you look at numbers where you can make 12 or 15%, 20%, 30% in some cases, when they sell the property, it's like, I couldn't have done that on my own.
Right.
There's no way I could do that. So I just started trusting, these sponsors and syndicators that are just brilliant at what they do.
Awesome. And that's a whole nother show in itself.
Yeah,
for sure.
Totally.
So we've got theshredmethod.com, and you're also active on Instagram. It's just Adam.Carroll, ADAM.CARROLL. Watch out for anything other than that.
Yes.
So they can reach out to you on Instagram or on shredmethod.com. Hey, man, I really appreciate your time today. And man, it's just kind of like spawned that thing in my mind. It's like, now I got to go get to work. I got to start shredding.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Brett, to be with you and share with your audience. I mentioned this before, but what you're doing, it's vital. It's vitally important that people get whatever on-ramp they get to financial literacy. It's vital they get it. So you're providing that, and I applaud you for it.
Oh, well, thank you, sir. And thank you for your time, because without you, this couldn't be possible. And without the listeners out there, this could not be possible at all. So thank you for tuning in this week. Reach out, go check out theshredmethod.com. Check out the masterclass, because if it's perked your ears, it's perked your brain. Now the next thing to do is take action. Take that knowledge and turn it into wisdom. Make a difference in your life. Lift the weight from your back. Let's run marathons without 30-pound weight vests, huh?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, thanks again, everybody. Until the next time, Real Estate Mogul MD. We'll see you.